Hi there. I'm Claudia Hosky from Fed Insider. And on behalf of the George Washington University College of Professional Studies, Carasoft, and Lookout, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, Mobile Security, the Human Layer is the New Attack Surface. Please type your questions and comments into the Q&A pod. If we don't get to them during today's webinar, we'll share them with our speakers so he can follow up with you. Also, take note of the Resources tab on the left side of your screen to download today's slides and other reading materials on the topic. We offer live captioning for all of our webinars. To follow along, use the Live Captioning or CART tab located above the slides. We'll have the full transcript available for download in the next day or two. And to earn training credit for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all survey questions and stay online for the duration of today's hour-long conversation. And now, let me turn over the reins to our moderator, Jane Norris from Fed Insider. Take it away, Jane.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. This is going to be a great conversation, a really in-depth conversation about mobile security. It's really fascinating what's going on today, so let's get right into it. Phishing today isn't just email. Adversaries are now exploiting SMS, Signal, LinkedIn, QR codes, and more to directly target your people on devices they rely on most. These mobile-specific tactics like smishing and quishing are designed to exploit human trust, not technical flaws, and they're working. Protecting users from falling for such schemes is difficult. Threat researchers have seen malicious smishing campaigns deploy zero-click malware that can hijack verification codes and one-time passwords, replicating screen interfaces and stealing application credentials. One report identified why mobile users are more at risk, and these include reduced screen size that makes suspicious URLs harder to identify, touch screens that make it harder for a user to inspect a URL, and mobile channels like SMS and QR codes that can create a false sense of trust. Today, we're honored to welcome our featured speaker, Tim Lemaster. Tim is Vice President and Worldwide Systems Engineer for Lookout. We'll discuss the ways that security professionals can empower users to recognize and protect themselves from social engineering tactics on mobile devices, and how agencies can close the visibility and control gaps left open by traditional EDR tools. Tim, it's so nice to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you, Jane. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Me too. It's a pleasure and an honor. So please tell us a little about your background. What have you been doing? What brought you into mobile security at Lookout?
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of experience or scenario. But I've been doing networking and cybersecurity for a long time. I've worked at Juniper. I've worked at General Dynamics. I've worked in a number of places. I spent some time in the Air Force. But I've been at Lookout for a little over 10 years now. And during that time period, focused on mobile security and just leading a team of solution engineers, helping customers and prospects understand the mobile security landscape. And it's evolved a lot over the years, and I enjoy it. It's a fun role to have.
It's certainly ever evolving. So I think there will always be new issues to attack. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about actually how the attackers themselves are evolving their social engineering tactics, especially in the context of mobile phishing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Phishing used to be this sort of spray and pray, game of numbers, right? Attackers would send a bunch of messages and inevitably a few of them would succeed, but it was very low tech. It was very low cost though, too, right? But it's changed significantly, as we are all familiar with, I'm sure. It's moved from that spray and pray model to, a very highly targeted approach typically. And we all still get an occasional, just random message that, about your package being available or something like that. But if someone's really trying to target you, they've done their homework typically, and we'll get into more detail in this later, of course, but they understand your background, and they will target you using open source information, and then they'll leverage AI to improve their success rate. They will, gone are the days where you could look for grammatical errors and spelling issues and things like that. Nowadays, the phishing messages that we get are often really well done.
So the average user really wouldn't be able to differentiate?
Not always, or not usually. I mean, certainly some of them are just obvious, and we've all gotten those. But a really well-crafted phishing message is hard to distinguish from something legitimate, and it's not the sort of thing that we all feel. Probably those of us that work in this space, or are cyber savvy or cyber aware, I would say, we all believe that we could spot a phishing message, and we usually can, but depending on how much time and effort has gone into that, we can be tricked. If they know their audience, if they know you as an individual, and they've done a lot of recon and know what you're interested in, we can all fall for stuff like that.
Wow. Well, that's scary, because if they can fool the people who are doing the work, man, that's not an easy thing to do. All right. So why mobile devices? Why are they such a prime target, particularly in government and enterprise sectors?
Well, partially because threat actors, frankly, understand, they know that mobile devices are less protected, right? Our laptops and desktops, the systems, email, for example, which is where when you first hear about phishing, you think of email. That's where we get training about how to spot a phishing email and things like that. We all think of it as it relates to email. But threat actors know that mobile is usually less protected. Orgs don't have good security. They often don't even have good visibility to what's going on a mobile device, even if it's managed by them. But they also understand that mobile devices, we're a little more vulnerable on mobile devices. We respond more quickly, typically, right? We have this thing with us all the time. It's with us 24/7, essentially. So if we get a message, we see it, and we're more quick to respond. But also, the smaller screen and the touch screen itself makes it hard to hover over a URL or hover over a message and see where it's going. We're often in a hurry, so we're not as vigilant. It's just part of it's human nature. Part of it is threat actors doing a good job of targeting us.
So are you saying that we're part of the problem, though, that the mobile user should really be doing things differently?
Well, yes and no. I mean, yes. At the end of the day, humans are a weak link in security. We all know that. We make mistakes. All of us do. Even the best of us, like I talked about before. So we are part of the problem, but we can't blame it on humans all the time. There are technologies that we should be leveraging to assist, right? But one thing that I would say is, for whatever reason, on mobile, we think of it as a phone, and it's really not. It's really, a phone is just an app on this device. It's a small computer, and we need to try to remember that as we're using it. That a phone is just the application. It's a small computer, and we need to be a little more vigilant or contemplative, as we use a mobile device, and not be so quick to respond. And the other thing is that sometimes if we get a message in SMS, we might be a little bit leery of it or wary about it. But if we get it in Signal or WhatsApp or over LinkedIn, we might not think of it as quite as carefully as we would over SMS.
Yeah, more trusted channels that you're used to
That's
using
right.
in your normal business day, and
Yeah.
you wouldn't think of them as being compromised. All right. Well, we're talking today to Tim Lemaster, Vice President of Worldwide Systems Engineering at Lookout. And let's talk about the Lookout Threat Landscape Report, the one from 2024, which I read recently. Some of the highlights talk about mobile phishing as a key tactic for credential theft. And credential theft, it's been going on a long time. So why are attackers still focusing so heavily on stealing credentials?
Yeah, well, as the As the famous quote about bank robbers, said when the bank robber said when asked why does he rob banks, he said because that's where the money is. And you could say the same thing about credential theft, right? Credentials, if I can steal the credentials and get access to the organization, it just reduces the barrier to entry significantly. I don't have to worry about finding an exploit and understanding how to bypass an org's defenses. And I walk right in the front door, essentially. I look like a user that is authorized to be there. It doesn't really set off any alerts. And so it's just an easier way to get access to an organization without tripping a bunch of alarms or alerts, if you will. And the goal was to get the credentials, use them quickly, move laterally, and then start exfiltrating data out as quickly as you can.
So, I would have to ask about the whole credential issue. Is that a credential problem? I mean, have we reached the point where credentials are, really part of the problem, not the solution?
Yeah, I think there is some of that, right? I mean, we've all read about, and many of us use passkeys. Those help a lot, right? Because we don't have to always remember a password. But they're not ubiquitous. We don't have them everywhere. Not all systems support them. So, I think we have to deal with passwords for a few years, still, a few more years. But eventually, we'll see less of them, I think. And certainly, the other issue, of course, is that MFAs or multi-factor authentication is becoming more standardized, more popular. And so that helps a little bit as well.
All right. I'm sure there's lots of other credential issues that we could deal with, but thank you, audience. I see your questions coming in. Be sure to go to the resources tab there and ask any questions that you would like. And you can also find information about Tim and Lookout at that location. And we have some slides coming up for you too. So make sure you check all of that out. All right, so let's move on from credentials to attack timelines. It used to be that credentials were stolen, and it may take weeks or months for that to be discovered or used, and they can live inside the system. Has that changed too?
It really has. In fact, that's probably one of the biggest changes we've seen around credential theft is how quickly they can be used. Threat actors are moving so much faster now, and it's not just how quickly they can be used, but the whole sort of process and the TTPs that we see the actors using has changed as well. I think we're showing a slide here that talks about what we call the modern kill chain. And this is what we're seeing in the market, right? This is the idea that the attackers that are leveraging phishing for the most success are using this sort of a model where they do their reconnaissance, they do their homework, if you will. So they look at your LinkedIn profile or your Facebook profile or your information about you that's leaked via public data leaks and that sort of thing, and then they'll execute some kind of a social engineering engagement, whether that's over phishing or executive impersonation, and lots of different ways that might occur. They'll try to steal those credentials, right? And then once they have the credentials, they'll steal data and then consider trying to extort you or your organization for that information, right? So some of the groups that we're very familiar with, if you're following this space closely, groups like Scattered Spider and groups like that have been using TTPs similar to this, although they tend to target a help desk. That's sort of Scattered Spider's specific TTP, is they like to behave or pose as an end user or an employee, contacting the help desk to try to get their credentials reset. And they've been very successful with that. They've compromised really big, defended, savvy organizations like MGM and Caesars and Adidas, the insurance industry. So they've been really successful with that approach. But it's it's slightly different than what we show here in the modern kill chain, but it's using the same concept of social engineering. And it's just the target is the help desk more so than an individual.
And so that can happen in literally minutes.
It can, yeah. Some of the attacks we're seeing, it's near real time essentially. So you'll get a message that says, we saw unusual activity on your Coinbase account or something like that. And rather than ask you to click on something, they'll say, respond no if this wasn't you. And you respond no, and they will respond with someone from the help desk will contact you. So they'll actually engage with you in voice phishing, or what's called vishing, in real time, and sound very credible. They'll have they won't have a foreign accent or anything. They'll give you a lot of confidence that they work for that organization, and will help you reset your credentials or regain access to or control of your account. And then at the same time, so they'll work with you to reset them, but there's usually a team of them. They work as a team. And so there'll be a back end set of employees. So while one person is posing as a help desk to help you reset things and regain control, there's someone else that's in the background leveraging those credentials almost in real time with your MFA token to try to take advantage of that access. They'll use it in cloud apps, in web services, anything they can use, anything they can get access to, they'll do it real time while they have you on the phone.
And once that happens, once that they're successfully in your system, how easy is it for the party that's being phished to identify that and do something about it?
Yeah, it depends on on the environment that they're, leveraging it. But if it's, one of these sort of vishing sort of approaches where, they're working with you real time, that happens pretty quickly. But you will know also pretty quickly, that you've been scammed, right? If it's the situation where they're leveraging it to access your enterprise credentials, or accessing using your enterprise credentials to access federal or corporate systems, you may not know quite as quickly because they look like you.
That's a terrible thought, really. Okay, well, this is interesting, and we'll get into more of the solutions here coming up. But talk to me a little more about tactics, techniques, and procedures, the TTPs of attackers. How have they changed?
Yeah, so the modern kill chain slide that I talked about a moment ago was a good example of that. But it's, the other thing that's changed quite a bit is that it's not just phishing. It's not just, one channel. They're not just contacting you on mobile. They will often contact you on multiple channels. So you'll get a phishing message on your mobile. You'll get a phishing message in email. They're really targeting you very specifically. And, things like executive impersonation are very common now as well. This is the idea that someone will contact you on your mobile device typically and say that they're your COO or CFO or someone of significance in your chain of command or in your organization. And and they'll talk through that as if they were that significant person and ask you they'll say something like, oh, I'm working at a remote site today with a partner. I don't have access to my normal phone. So I need access to the SharePoint server. Can you share the credentials with me? Things like that. So this idea of executive impersonation is really becoming quite common. And in fact, the FBI, I think on the screen, we're showing a graphic. It's just a screenshot, frankly, of an FBI, I think they call it a public service announcement. And that was put out not that long ago, maybe a month. I don't remember the date exactly, but sort of documenting and warning about this kind of executive impersonation and attack that was going on across the government. So it's a good sort of proof point of how common this is, not just targeting individuals, but organizations and federal employees.
And so, I mean, when you think about it, if someone higher up in your organization is asking you to do something, the automatic response is going to be to do it.
Yeah,
And
you're
so,
inclined to, right? You're more inclined to do it because that's a someone in your chain of command that's giving you very specific. You want to do the right thing. You want to be responsive. You want to help the boss, so to speak. But you really have to think about this critically, right? Is this really legitimate? And then obviously there are things you can do, reach out on other channels, things like that. And actually the PSA, and the link to it, I think, is in the slide as well, but the PSA provides a link to the full document where they lay out some ideas on how to defend yourself against this. But it is a very common technique that threat actors are using now.
yeah, that's it. I have heard real life stories about checks being cut because the CEO,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly right. And it used to be that someone would ask for a bunch of gift cards, right? And I suppose that type of request still occurs, but oftentimes, in an enterprise or a federal setting now, they're asking for access credentials. They want to know what's the password or credentials to this service or server that I need for this discussion I'm having.
So this is really fascinating stuff, and I just really enjoy talking about this. And I know we'll get to more, especially the artificial intelligence side of it. But talk to me about what the indicators of compromise look like. On a mobile device, is an advanced persistent threat campaign. Does it leave fingerprints or footprints, or how does the organization know that this is happening inside of their system?
Yeah, sometimes they won't, honestly. So, I mean, if you're examining the device, someone who's a researcher or really technically savvy about mobile devices, if you're examining it at a deep level, you might notice the footprint or the fingerprints of what looks like a device compromise, right? An operating system compromise. But so many organizations don't have good visibility to what's going on their mobile devices that they often wouldn't know. So the IOCs are really not that unique. If it's a really sophisticated actor, you may not even know that your device has been compromised. So it really points to the fact that we need, organizations need better visibility on mobile. Mobile bypasses traditional perimeter security systems. So you might think, well, we have good firewall and perimeter security. But if this device is communicating over cellular, then you have, that removes that perimeter security and visibility and that sort of thing. So they really need to address the visibility factor. If you have a good MTD solution, a mobile threat defense solution, they will usually recognize some indicator of compromise, often an OS compromise as the hallmark of an APT.
All right, so we'll get into some of the ways that you might use other advanced technologies to fight back against this artificial intelligence. But talk now about the complexity that artificial intelligence mobile threats, the threats against mobile users, how much more complex or difficult to see visibility. Does AI make the whole problem? Are they using as a tool?
Yeah, it makes it more complicated for sure. Because AI has changed the game completely for both attackers and defenders, though, right? If we focus on the sort of the attacker model first, or how it benefits the attackers first, it really lowers the bar for attackers to run their ruse, right? To play their game. They, like I talked about earlier, you don't have to worry about grammar and spelling issues and that sort of thing. those are essentially eliminated completely. But there are a lot of other tools like Fraud GPT that can be leveraged to help attackers execute their efforts. But even trusted LLMs, the ones that we all know and use, can help create attacks. Even generating code to help. So, for example, if you just go to an LLM that you use and you ask it to help you craft a good test phishing message, you'd be surprised at how good that message is, how well written it is, how convincing it can be, that sort of thing. So it really does benefit the attacker in that way. But you also have to think about the AI that's built into our phones. So more commonly, all of our devices are getting more AI integrated into it. And that AI is trying to assist. It's trying to help you, right, by summarizing incoming messages, and helping you understand the intent or the goal of an incoming message. But sometimes it will leave you with the impression that an incoming message is legitimate. If it summarized a message for you, it sort of makes it seem more credible, more legitimate. Or I've seen examples where your device may, in trying to tell you who is contacting you, it may actually give it credibility by saying something like, "This may be Coinbase," or "This may be Apple, Apple contacting you," and it legitimizes that message, suggesting that it might actually be legitimate. So, AI in those cases is getting tricked by its own attempt to understand the message and summarize it. It's actually making it worse.
So it can also be used to trick you into believing that somehow this is a legitimate. It might even come from a different source, like one that you use, Firebase or GitHub or something like that.
Sure.
So you're not really using this mode of communication, and something comes through it, you believe that it's true.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
All right. So that's the complicated part. How about artificial intelligence on the other side, helping agencies and individual companies make decisions about what their threats really are?
Yeah, no, and it's very useful there as well. So it cuts both ways, as you said. Um, AI can be used to help us recognize attacks and patterns, right? And actually understand, sort of in air quotes, understand intent in an incoming message, right? Is this a pig butchering, sort of message? We're probably familiar with pig butchering messages. We've read a lot about them, probably. Most people have anyway. Is it phishing? Is it executive impersonation? Sometimes AI can help us make those decisions, especially AI in the tools that we're using to defend against phishing attempts and other threats on mobile. So the AI can help the defenders recognize that and take the appropriate action or warn the user and that sort of thing. If you have an MTD or a mobile EDR sort of solution deployed in your environment. But it can also help correlate threats. And that's a big, factor here is understanding what else is going on across your organization. You might see a phishing message here, but maybe not fully understand that 30 other people inside the organization got that same phishing message. But AI can help you recognize that and understand what do they have in common. So that correlation factor will be a big benefit.
And do you think more organizations are using AI for that purpose, or is that something that you see developing in the future? For agencies that may not have a big security staff or budget, is AI going to be more of a factor in mobile defense?
It will be a factor more frequently, more commonly as we move forward. But today it's available primarily in, mobile EDR solutions and MTD solutions that are specifically focused on mobile threat. And so you have to have good defenses to apply those sort of AI features to recognizing threats and correlating it across the rest of your organization. Yeah, it's going to require, for a while anyway, it's going to require additional defensive services to recognize the benefit.
All right, we're coming up on just about halfway through. We're talking with Tim Lemaster. Great conversation about mobile defense and mobile threats, I think, probably more than defense, but we'll talk more about that too. Tim is the Vice President of Worldwide Systems. He's the engineer for Lookout. And Lookout publishes great information. I went through and read a lot of your blogs, Tim. I encourage people to do that. I also saw the Lookout Mobile Threat Landscape, the Q1 report. And in it, you talk about targeting different mobile platforms in specific ways, where Android and iOS users are being targeted differently with the same malicious campaign. So what does that mean for the IT department when they're trying to defend their systems and they have two different campaigns going on at the same time?
Yeah, well, they're often the same campaign, just different, tactics, right? Different approach. So we see this primarily because the two platforms, the two dominant, operating systems, iOS and Android, are a little bit different. Also because iOS is used more commonly in enterprises, and again, threat actors know that. It is the operating system. iPhones are the phone of choice for large enterprise and government typically. And iOS is well known for its security, its walled garden approach to security, for example, specifically as it relates to mobile applications, but also the operating system. So that means that we see, because of that walled garden approach, we see fewer malicious apps in the iOS ecosystem. And again, threat actors understand that, so they will target iOS devices with social engineering and phishing more commonly, but an Android user, they'll still target them primarily with malicious apps. Now, they may target both of them as a phishing attempt, but with Android, they may try to socially engineer the Android user to load a malicious app or install a malicious app, whereas with iOS, they'll really be focused on credential theft. But we do see scenarios where the threat actor understands well enough what the user, what the target audience is, and will adjust their TTPs accordingly.
And those vulnerabilities that are part of that system, does it lean toward one or the other more favorably in terms of security?
It really doesn't. We tend to think of iOS as being a little more secure just because of that walled garden approach, but at the end of the day, it's just different attack surface, different vulnerabilities in each platform. So again, threat actors understand that. They've usually, if they've done their homework, they've profiled you, they know what platform you're using, and they will target you accordingly.
Okay. And on the Lookout blog, there was a discussion about threat actors exploiting the mobile edge to compromise organizations, since security teams, according to you guys, don't necessarily have insight into everyday mobile devices. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on this earlier, but unfortunately, a lot of organizations just don't have good visibility to what's going on their mobile devices. So you really have to start in terms of how do you protect, what strategies to use. You really have to start with visibility. And then once you have that basic visibility with, an MTD solution, then you want to continue to improve on that. So you want to start getting real-time telemetry out of your devices. You want to start looking at things like web activity feeds and events that are occurring on the device. What threats has that user or device encountered? You want to start, getting access to that rich information, and then integrating that into your rest of your systems. So your SIM, your security incident and event manager, your SOAR system, your XDR environment. You want to take that data and feed it into your SIEM so you get a better operating picture of what's going on across your organization. And that becomes really important as you try to scale and understand, is this a threat or an attack on one individual or an organization, or a group of individuals? What is the goal here?
And so, how does an organization begin to implement this kind of security, device security at the edge?
Yeah, so it's again, and I keep saying this, but it starts with visibility. You have to deploy some type of agent or some type of solution that gives you that visibility on mobile. Most organizations really don't do that today. They would never consider providing a laptop to a user without lots of protection on it, right? It would have a DLP and firewall and email protection and a VPN and lots of options on a traditional endpoint. But on a mobile device, they oftentimes just have an MDM. And an MDM is a great management tool, but it doesn't typically give you the insight you need to adequately protect these devices. So you start with a traditional MTD kind of a solution, and then as you begin to get visibility and understanding of what's going on across your mobile devices that you manage, then you want to start looking at mobile EDR solutions. EDR, which are, EDR solutions for mobile are quite different. The traditional EDR that we're used to for traditional endpoints has access to a kernel and registry and lots of visibility to things that aren't possible on mobile. So you really have to have a mobile EDR solution that is sophisticated enough to give you visibility to events and activity on the device that you can use to get a better understanding and integration into your environment.
So, given what you just said, do you think that this will become part of federal guidance or compliance frameworks in the future?
Yeah, I don't have to, right? Threat actors will continue to evolve. There's actually whole businesses around this. There's a malware as a service, exploit brokers, these commercial software vendors. So there's a whole business around device compromise and credential theft and ransomware and things like that. So the defender community has to do the same. We have to evolve and keep up. For example, frameworks like the MITRE ATT&CK framework that most people are probably familiar with does a very good job of adapting to what's going on in the real world. We actually communicate and coordinate frequently with the MITRE team around what we're seeing, in the real world to ensure that the attack framework keeps up. So they do a very good job of that. It's not just, theoretical. These are, real world examples of what's occurring in what the kids call IRL, right? In real life.
And what about NIST or CISA recommendations? There are some for mobile devices. Do you think there are things that organizations can do, that agencies can do, that they're not really leaning into yet?
There is guidance out there, and some of those are quite good. Certainly, I wouldn't say that, there are any that are being overlooked completely. Most organizations are aware of them, but a big part of that is keeping the device updated, patched, if you will, right? The patches are typically available when there's a vulnerability or some type of significant exploit occurring in real life. Very quickly, the operating system providers and the app providers will respond to that pretty quickly and make an update available. But how do you keep your users on that? How do you get them to move to that new update? Users are often slow to update. So you've got to have policies in place to manage this update. And this applies not only to the operating system, but to the applications on your device as well, especially if they're in something like a widely deployed social media app or the web browser. We see, for example, vulnerabilities in Chrome or the Chromium-based web browsers come out, sort of monthly or on irregular intervals, but they're pretty common. So you've got to not only keep an eye on the operating system updates, but updates for significant apps that are used across all the devices in your fleet or most of the devices in your fleet.
All right. So there are things that obviously they can do. Do you think there should be policy revision? Are agencies really at the point where they're recognizing this and yet still not taking a step forward to revise their policies?
I wouldn't say they're not making the attempt. They're not, they are aware of it, is a better way to say that. They are aware of this concern. There's a little complacency oftentimes around mobile. It's just for whatever reason, we still think of it as a phone. Organizations don't necessarily put the right level of emphasis on it. Again, going back to this, the phone is just an app on the device. These are very complex devices. They need to be protected just like any other endpoint. There are known exploited vulnerabilities. For example, you asked about some of the things that CISA does. They publish a list of known exploited vulnerabilities, KEV list, for example. So organizations are aware of those and move quickly to patch them. You just have to manage your users to ensure that they are updating in a timely manner.
All right. Now, talking about things that people exploit, how about application? So the average person has about 80 apps on their mobile device. I'm sure I have more than that, which means mobile app vulnerabilities. So is that a significant gap in enterprise security?
Again, I wouldn't say it's a significant gap, but it has to be managed. And as we talked about, the users are slow to update, even when there is an update available. So you have to enforce good policy management. So when an application has a vulnerability, especially if it's in a web browser or something like that, there are a couple ways to enforce or encourage your users to update. But one of the ways that we often suggest is to set sort of escalating policies. So you alert the user that web browser needs to be updated in the next 3 days, and then you set automated escalation policies, for example. So after 5 days, there are consequences. For example, you might take away their access to an internal service after 5 days. After 7 days, the consequences become even more significant. You might take away their access to email. So you have to manage that to ensure that your users are updating to address those threats. But it's also broader than just vulnerabilities, right? There are other considerations that have to be factored in. Things like understanding the risk level associated with all the apps across the organization. So even an app that's not commonly, not deployed on all your devices like a browser or WhatsApp or something like that, but even smaller, less common applications, the organization needs to understand what's in those applications. What is the behavior of those applications? What SDKs are they using? Software development kits. Most apps use some SDK to monitor performance and get visibility to issues going on in the application. So you as an organization or the organization that's responsible for the device and for the security of that device need to understand the behavior of those apps, what the SDKs are using, what networks are they communicating with, how much of the data that they're collecting off that device is being shared with some server in a foreign country that you may not trust. Mm-hmm. So getting that level of visibility does a lot to build trust and address risk across your organization.
True. And there are ways, I understand, that mobile security features can be disabled within phones. Is that the case? And how is that done?
It can be done. There are, safe modes, if you will, within both iOS and Android operating systems, that you can put the phone in where it doesn't process as many, messages in the background and that sort of thing. So there are definitely built-in security features of the device that you can leverage to make that easier to defend against.
Hmm. Okay, that's called jailbreaking.
Well, jailbreaking is the process of removing those protections, right?
Okay.
So
Why would anybody do that? I mean, unless you unless you have a desire to be, more vulnerable, why would anyone do that?
well, I would say most people do not. There are certainly we see it in the marketplace, and we see it in the ecosystem. Most organizations don't allow it, especially a federal organization. But you need that visibility to what's going on across your mobile devices. But more importantly, it may not be the user doing it, right? So these advanced, really sophisticated APT actors or APTs, they will leverage remote jailbreaks to compromise your device. So this is typically done by exploiting some vulnerability in the operating system, and then leveraging that to compromise the integrity of that operating system. So the mobile device itself has most of them. The operating systems have really good application sandboxing and process isolation, but if the device operating system itself has been compromised through some remote jailbreak or remote operating system compromise, then the great separation and sandboxing that's built in doesn't really work. For example, if you're using an app like WhatsApp or Signal or something that has really good encryption, end-to-end encryption built into the messaging app, it really doesn't matter because the attacker already has access to the messages as you type them before they're encrypted over the wire. So these threat actors, if they don't leverage these commonly, right? So most of us won't see these because they're very expensive to develop, and so they're very targeted. The majority of us would not see this on one of our devices. But if you're a VIP or an executive at a large financial corporation or a senior government official, you are a target, and they can and will be used against your device.
Yeah, it's true. This has really been a fascinating conversation. So much more to learn. Let's just recap for a minute, though, and talk to us what your advice is to a client about a strong mobile device strategy. What does that really look like?
Yeah. Again, I sound like a little bit redundant here around this visibility issue, but it really does start there. So you have to start with getting visibility to what's going on in your fleet of devices that your users are using, and then move toward getting more actionable telemetry out of them, and then feeding that information into your SIM or your SOAR, so you get a good understanding of what's going on across not just the fleet of mobile devices, but across all the devices that you have. And it actually, you might, for example, have a good threat feed for IOCs on your traditional endpoints, but being able to take some of those IOCs and understand whether your mobile devices have hit some of those, endpoints as well. For example, a C2 server that was shared with you, about malware on a desktop. You want to sometimes take that same C2 server and understand, are any of my mobile devices hitting that same server? Is this broader than I understand? Is it broader than just traditional endpoints? Organizations often don't have that visibility, so they, getting mobile EDR solution deployed and leveraging mobile threat intelligence available through that will give you that visibility to understand how many devices have hit that same C2 server so that you understand is it broader than mobile.
Mhm. Yeah, and it usually is. I mean, the point is to go from mobile into the entire system, right?
Yeah, that's right. But sometimes you'll see it, start on traditional endpoints, or you'll get the IOC, the indicator of compromise on a traditional endpoint because you have good visibility there. So you'll get the C2 server, or it'll be shared with you as a threat feed, indicator of compromise. You'll get that via one of your threat feeds and say, here's an IOC associated with this piece of malware, this threat actor. And it's intended to be focused on traditional endpoints, laptops, if you will. But understanding, pivoting, taking that IOC, that C2 server, pivoting to your mobile data and understanding, are any of my mobile devices hitting that as well, is really important.
Okay. And so given that, what role should mobile threat intelligence play in the national cybersecurity strategy?
Yeah, well, that's a good follow-up question. So, mobile threat intel can really help you fill in some of those gaps, understand what a threat actor, what their TTPs are, not just across mobile or traditional endpoints, but across your entire organization. So you might combine the telemetry and the information that you get from that threat feed and augment that information with mobile threat intel to help you understand the scope of the threat. It provides that sort of cross-platform threat management view, right? For example, are they using executive impersonation or phishing attempts to target a specific users or a group of users, in finance or in your engineering department or that sort of thing. But also, we make a lot of we put out a lot of research and reporting around threat actors, and we make a lot of that available on our public website, for example. And so, understanding the trends around threat actors and APT actors in particular, whether they be malware focused or phishing focused, really helps you understand how to defend your environment.
And do you think that the mobile security standards and guidance that we have right now aligns with zero trust mandates? Does there need to be more in terms of aligning mobile with zero trust and making?
No, I think it aligns pretty well today. Mobile should be treated like a traditional endpoint in this regard, right? You should not auto trust a mobile device. You should apply conditional access policies to it, the same as you do a traditional, endpoint. So you can do that with MTD. You validate the state of the device. Is it malware free? Is it, the operating system been rooted or jailbroken? So it should be a trusted, device before you allowed access to data and services across the government. And an MTD can not only help you determine that healthy state of the device, but it can also help you remediate an issue quickly as well. So if a device has got malware on it, you can walk the user through, or the MTD can help you walk the user through how to remove that and recover to a compliant state. And then, central logging and monitoring are important to zero trust architectures as well, right? So again, mobile EDR and solutions, MTD and mobile EDR solutions will give you that data to log and capture for your zero trust requirements.
So, Tim, as we look to 2025 and beyond, what trends in mobile security do you think leaders cannot afford to ignore?
The very first thing it would be, we can't continue to ignore mobile. It's, we all leverage mobile. We're all users of mobile, but we ignore it from a defensive, solution perspective. Oftentimes, your users are almost certainly using mobile devices, and those mobile devices almost certainly have access to the same data that your traditional endpoints have. So we need to remember that as we're deploying defensive solutions. Second, social engineering can't be ignored either. This is a very common technique. It's growing in scale. In fact, if I think we're showing a slide now talking about some of the stats from our most recent report, and some of the stats are pretty alarming. For example, 100% of the enterprises that use Lookout were targeted with some type of social engineering threat. In Q1, that's pretty alarming. And so it really just emphasizes the extent to which phishing and social engineering attacks are being used on threat actors. So when we think about that in the context of humans and us making the right decision every time, I think it's sort of fair to say that we need to give them some assistance, a safety net, if you will, to ensure that even if they don't make the right decision every time, there's some security protection in place to ensure the government credentials and access to the data is not compromised.
Well, Tim, this was a fascinating hour. I can't thank you enough for being with us. You've been listening to Tim Lemaster, Vice President for Worldwide Systems Engineer for Lookout, and all the resources that he mentioned, all the details that he discussed. You can find them on the resources tab right here at Fed Insider. So please check that out. And sir, we look forward to talking with you again. It's really been my pleasure to host this today. Thank you
for the opportunity. It was a great discussion.
All right. It was a great discussion. And now let's turn it back over to Claudia Hosky to wrap this up for all of us today from Fed Insider. Hi, Claudia.
Thanks, Jane. And thanks so much for this fabulous discussion today. And for our audience, thank you for your participation. Training certificates will be emailed after the webinar ends. And remember to log back in the next day or two if you want to download a copy of our closed captioning transcript. We hope you'll join us for part 2 and 3 in this mobile security series. Those events will be happening on July 10th and the 29th, and we'll share those details in our follow-up email. We have many other webinars in the works, so visit fedinsider.com. You can see what's coming up and register for multiple webinars at the same time. And while you're there, you can check out our podcast, Feds at the Edge. And with that, this is Fed Insider, signing off.